Welcome to Adventure House Auctions preview of the auction number 101, featuring the pulp titles published by Harold Hersey from the Dr. Lomezo collection. For those who are unaware of this early pulp editor and publisher, Harold Hersey's pulp career had many ups and downs. Well, to be fair, more downs than ups. Born in Montana in 1893, Harold Hersey found his way east to attend George Washington University and worked at the Library of Congress. After a brief marriage, Harold moved to Greenwich Village, New York, and helped famed women's rights activist Margaret Sanger publish her journal. His other literary publications included The Open Road and The Quill. Both of these ultra-rare publications will be in a future auction. Just after the end of World War I, Hersey got a job as editor at Street and Smith, where he produced the Thrill book. Street and Smith had been a big publisher of dime novels from the late 1800s and had created several new pulp titles by changing the format from a dime novel to that of a pulp. Titles like Wild West Weekly and Top Notch magazine, and even retitling Nick Carter to Detective Story magazine, but the Thrill book was different. It was a whole new title without having originally been a dime novel. It has been surmised that the Thrill book was only distributed within the 5 boroughs of New York City. It contained no ads and was printed and bound closer to the size of a dime novel than that of a pulp. His tenure at the magazine only lasted half of the run, and Hersey found new employment almost immediately with the Clayton Group of magazines and its founder William Clayton. Hersey remained with Clayton, working his way up from title editor to group editor for a number of magazines. Around 1927, Hersey met the flamboyant Bernard Macfadden. Macfadden mostly published large bedsheet publications like Midnight and Dream World. After leaving Macfadden, and with the help of a magazine distributor, Hersey set up magazine publishers and released his first set of pulp magazines. Most of these nascent titles never got any traction and was replaced with ever more obscure titles. Pulps like Under Fire magazine, Firefighters, and The Dragnet came and went with great regularity. It was with The Dragnet that Hersey became enamored with the quote gang, unquote magazines. He briefly takes over another publisher's gang title, The Underworld, increasing his small line of titles. Without any fanfare, Hersey leaves magazine publishers. Bernard Macfadden in 1929 steps in and financially backs Hersey to form the Good Story magazine company. Hersey's mania with gangsters takes full flower and releases several gang titles like Gangster Stories and Racketeer Stories. One of the titles, Love and War Stories, was originally advertised as being a Macfadden magazine. The whole pulp industry was reeling under the effects of the stock market crash late in 1929. Publishers who'd be selling their magazines for as much as a quarter each suddenly found their readership dwindling because they couldn't afford those magazines anymore. Pulp publishers had a problem. They'd been paying their authors as much as 5 cents a word when the market could afford such rates. Very few titles were being published with a 10-cent cover price, but their sales topped 100,000 copies or more. For those on the low end, like Harold Hersey, might pay his lead author a living wage for his story, but the rest were paid paupers' wages for theirs. Top that off with Hersey's near insistence on charging the max price of a quarter created an obstacle. His sales weren't great enough to support that quarter cover price, and hence his titles came and went with great regularity. Titles like Thrills of the Jungle, Prison Stories, and Miracle Science and Fantasy Stories were gone practically before the ink had a chance to dry. Hersey would also publish magazines that looked just like his Good Story imprint, but hit the newsstands under a different company name. Popular Engineering Stories in 1930 was a prime example of this. Late in 1931, Macfadden decided to pull his backing, and Hersey had to buy him outright. Hersey formed several imprints and continued to put out gangster and other titles. New York Stories was released late in 1931 and lasted a scant 4 issues. It was only a year later in 1932 that Hersey had to close shop and sell off his assets. Only Greater Gangster Stories briefly found a new home in 1933. In 1936, Hersey with 2 other backers released a small handful of hybrid pulps. These titles featured mostly scantily illustrated stories of comic strip characters, and the magazines were saddle-stitched like a comic book with only 96 pages. Flash Gordon Strange Adventure magazine nearly folded before you could read the title. Also in that line of magazines were Tailspin Tommy Air Adventure magazine and Dan Dunn Detective magazine. Neither made it past 2 issues. These 3 titles, Flash Gordon Strange Adventure Magazine, Love and War Stories, and New York Stories, are in auction number 101. The rest you'll find in upcoming auctions here at Adventure House Auctions.